What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kinnahan, and it was a very neutral, introduction there because this has been a very sad night of Commanders football. It has been a very disappointing night and kind of a culmination of the entire season up until this point. You guys know what happened. Washington loses to the Seattle Seahawks 38-14 on Sunday Night Football and fall to 3-6 on the year, 3 games below 500, the worst record in the Dan Quinn era. But the big news, of course, is Jayden Daniels and the arm injury he suffered with 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. The Commanders were trailing 38-7 at that point in time, and Daniels' left arm bends in a direction it should not bend in while he's rushing to try and reach for the goal line. And ultimately, he gets put in. The cart comes out for him. Does not elect to go onto the cart. He decides to walk it off, and left arm gets put into an air cast. And that's that. Really, that is that. Let's jump into the first read here. Look, the first thought for this is, of course, Daniels was in the game with 7 minutes to go, and you're down by 31 points. Why is that the case? Why is that the case? That is the first thing. I've started recording this before Dan Quinn's presser. I'm hoping towards the end, we'll get some quotes from Quinn, and why Daniels being in the game makes sense. If I had to guess what he would say, I think he would say something such as they want to they wanted the offense to finish a drive in the end zone, which that drive was very successful for Washington. That one drive in particular, Washington was marching towards the end zone and had a second and goal, third and goal situation. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's not a great excuse. I'm assuming that's unless he actually takes accountability for it, which we don't usually see coaches do that in situations like this. So we'll have to wait and see what Quinn says later in this episode. But yeah, it sucks. It really does. And I tweeted this out, but there's a difference between losing a home primetime game in the fashion that Washington did and losing a home primetime game in the way that Washington did and losing your franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future. I'd assume for the season, the way the season is going, there's just a different element to it, really. It has been a very disappointing season. I want to read out this tweet from Nikki Javala, writer for The Athletic. I think she put it best. Everything went wrong for the Commanders a year after everything went right for them. I think that definitely describes it best. You look at last season for Washington, the Commanders did not have a top 4 team in the league in terms of talent and coaching last year. Yet they were able to stick in games that maybe they shouldn't have been able to stay in, and ultimately took advantage of a weaker schedule, and ultimately we're able to make an appearance in the NFC Championship game. But it was very clear that Washington's roster was not a top 4 roster in the league. You could even say it wasn't even a top 8 roster, right, in the league, top 10. And there were some holes to fill over the offseason because, yes, making the NFC Championship game is great, but I think the belief heading into the offseason from fans at least was, all right, you're now a title contender. You're now a Super Bowl contender. How are they going to be able to get over the hump? And how are they going to be able to add assets that can help them get over the hump and make it to the Super Bowl and potentially win it? When the real question should have been, how can we make this roster average, really? Or maybe, in the top half. Because if you think about this roster last season, Benjamin St-Juste was a starting cornerback, right? You had, even when Marshawn Lattimore came back, or came to Washington, and off of his injury, he struggled mightily. There were some pretty big holes to fill, and it's not like Washington kept a lot of their talent either. They lost their leading sacks, the pass rusher who led them in sacks last season, and that was the big loss, you could say, in free agency. They lost a couple of reliable wide receivers that maybe are not like really good, but Zacchaeus and Brown were able to deliver down the stretch of the season. Um, and yeah, those are some pretty, maybe underrated losses. Jeremy Chin as well, which he had his ups and downs in coverages, but he was a reliable piece at safety for them for a majority of last season. There was a lot that they maybe lost that you weren't entirely thinking of. The kicker situation as well. How lucky was Washington in the kicker situation? They doinked their way into the divisional round, right? Um, and some of those issues still are issues. Uh, Now, Adam Peters tried to limit some of them and added some more talent. For example, at left tackle was a weakness. Maybe it wasn't the top weakness last season, but it was a major weakness. And so Adam Peters goes out and gets Laremy Tunsil. Wide receiver was a weakness, especially after losing Olamide Zacchaeus and De'Ami Brown, and he brings in Debo Samuel, right? So they go out and try and help out this team and improve this team, especially in the offensive end. I felt like defensively it was more of those free agents. You go Dietrich Wise, Will Harris, Jonathan Jones. All three of those guys we'll get into in a second, but all three of those guys, have missed a lot of time. Um, but those are a lot of free agents that you sign to 1 year deals, 2 year deals, which when you become a free agent in this league, that means you're a little bit older. And that's how this team has kind of stayed older, even though maybe you could say that they should be getting younger. And even when they traded for Debo Samuel, trade for Larry Tunsil, they only had 5 draft picks, which was the lowest out of any team last draft. And again, once more, the draft capital for Washington looks very grim in 2026. But you look at all these moves that they made, Washington was never really, a top team in terms of roster talent. And it kind of, the run to the NFC Championship game last year definitely messed with people's expectations for this team. I have this team missing the playoffs heading into this year. I had them as a 9 or 10 win team. I don't remember exactly how many, but I had them missing the playoffs just barely. And that was with a team that I thought would be, mostly healthy and everything. And now this team that has just been hit week after week with injuries, like I mentioned with those free agents, Wise, Harris, Jones, all were out. Wise and Harris out for the season with injuries. And Jones was on injured reserve for a month and a half. You look at, the vibes were, you could say, were off from the start with the Terry McLaurin contract situation. You had Austin Eckler out for the year. You had Noah Brown out. He's been out for a large majority of time. Jayden Daniels has been out for some time. And now it kind of just all the luck, you could say. I don't really like using the word luck. But there is some of that in sports. And Washington got really lucky in some situations last year, and you could say it's regressing to the mean. The way that things have just gone horribly wrong for Washington in so many different levels so far this season. It's depressing to watch, really. Just because there's so many things, and really, the one exciting thing that Washington fans have kind of stuck with so far this season is when Jayden Daniels is healthy. Jayden Daniels has been a very fun player to watch, and now the way Washington and the coaching staff treated Daniels tonight is ridiculous. Really, it's disrespectful in some ways, and keeping him out there down by 31 with 7 minutes to go. And yes, the injury could happen at any point. I understand that. But it happening when this team is down by as many as they were down by with the amount of time left in this game, in the situation, is just like another it's just another bullet basically. Um and yeah, and now a season that maybe some fans had hopes of a deep postseason run again, trying to get back to the NFC Championship game and get over that hump has turned into a season of nightmares, really. It really has been. Um, and there's definitely some directions Washington can go from here. That's a lot for the first read, but let's jump into the offense. The offense overall tonight, and I'm just going to talk on this season as well. I think Linnell Willingham put it right. He said basically exactly what I was thinking. Uh, it's lost creativity. It's really has lost creativity. Cliff Kingsbury last season ran one of the most creative offenses in the NFL. There was a lot of things that were happening in the backfield. There was a lot of misdirection. There was a lot of, you know, action. It felt like a lot of action, a lot of moving east to west. This season, the creativity we've seen it in some moments, but mainly the creativity has just evaporated from this offense, especially tonight. The run game has really struggled for Washington so far, especially in the last few weeks. Tonight, they ran for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns, but still only 4 yards per carry. And again, most of that as well was because of Jayden Daniels, who ran for 51 and a touchdown on his scrambles. But we have really seen a decrease in designed runs for Jayden so far this season. I don't remember seeing like a drive that was highlighted by a Jayden Daniels designed run. When that felt like we saw that a ton last year. Maybe that's because they're being really cautious with Jayden Daniels so far this season, and that's really seemed what the mindset has been like so far ever since he's been drafted. They try to be very cautious with him, but ultimately they make one mistake, right? If you're trying to be very cautious with him, why is he out there down 31 with halfway through the fourth quarter? What if you're trying to be cautious with this guy who's dealt with injuries so far in his career, a good amount, especially this season? Why is he out there? Why is he out there? And Washington paid for it. The coaching staff paid for it. It's that one hits. And yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation. Keeping him out there has felt like just everything against what this coaching staff has been about with Jayden and how they've kind of treated Jayden so far in his career. And they kind of just did the exact opposite of how they've treated him tonight. So that was, yeah, I guess I'm still talking about it, but it's really the storyline of tonight, especially on the offensive side of things. The passing game never got going, really. The pressure was too much. Jayden got sacked 4 times tonight. The offensive line really struggled mightily against the Seahawks defensive line that is pretty good, especially the pass rush. I felt like was really good. Luke McCaffrey got injured early on. Just to add on to the injuries, we'll get into a few more later on. McCaffrey got injured early. He was ruled out for the rest of the game. So it was Deebo Samuel, Jalen Lane, Traylon Burks, Chris Moore as the 4 healthy receivers for Washington in this game. Zach Ertz led the team in receiving yards, 4 catches for 46 yards. But even him, it feels like, it's hit that cliff. Pardon my, play on words there, but it's hit a cliff with some of these veterans. And Zach Ertz is definitely, you could tell from last season to this season, it's taken a pretty large step back. And that's kind of what you risk, bringing in back some of these older veterans that you may rely on for heavy production. And Washington's been doing that too much. They've been doing it too much, and they're paying for it, especially with Zach Ertz in the tight end position so far this season. Yeah, it was pretty much Ertz and Deebo and friends tonight. Jalen Lane had 3 catches for 29 yards. He maybe you could say hasn't been the caliber of a player that maybe you were hoping for, but he's been forced to play a much larger role so far this season than a fourth round pick was meant to play this early in his career. Traylon Burks made his Washington debut tonight, the former first round pick from the Titans about 3 years ago. He had one catch for 14 yards. It was a pretty solid toe drag on the sideline, but didn't see much from him. Chris Moore just really lacks separation skills for him and for most of these receivers overall as well. There's no separation downfield, and it really, really, really hurt this team. I kind of talked about the run game, but it's the one bright spot is Chris Rodriguez, right? Chris Rodriguez had a really solid game, 12 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown. I've really liked Rodriguez as a player, and it was awesome to see him stick with this era after being a Rivera pick, and keeping a job here in the Quinn era, which is really interesting because again they cut him last year, and then he's now kind of been one of their lead backs, especially tonight. He was their lead back, so at least efficiency wise, you look at Bill Krosky Merritt. With Bill, you could tell there's definitely still a big learning curve. Still, some of his vision really, is not exactly, you could say, one of the top, or still needs improvement. So that is also part of it as well. Um, there's a lot of things that Bill still needs to work on, and it was kind of highlighted tonight. It was highlighted tonight. Defense, 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 defense. All right. Defensively, Jeremy Reeves led the team in tackles with 9. He had a tackle for loss. Lulu and Amos and Wagner all had 7 behind him. No sacks for the pass rush tonight. Sam Darnold was a perfect 16 of 16 in the first half. Finished 21 of 24 for 330 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. Pick came in garbage time. Jackson Smith and Jigba had 100 and something yards, 110 yards at halftime, and 6 catches. It's more of the same. It's more of the same. And we can talk about Lattimore. Lattimore was also a player that got injured in this one, and we'll just have to see about his status moving forward. But yeah, it's more of the same from a unit that really just lacks talent. I've talked about it on this podcast before. This unit lacks talent, and it's more than just, are they playing hard? Dan Quinn, with his teams, you know that they're going to play hard, and that's what happened last season. They fought to the very end in so many games last season, and they ended up winning a lot of them. This time around, defensively, I think it's more than just playing hard. It's the talent. There's just a lack of talent on this defense. Marshawn Lattimore is not who you thought he would be. And Washington still thinks that it's great to play man coverage with Lattimore and Amos and Sanders, still guys who have struggled in man coverage so far this season. And they still are playing it. It's like doing the same thing over and over, getting the same result. I've talked about it before. It's insanity. So there's still the same things are still happening in the secondary. And I do like how they're trying new things. Tyler Owens has got a lot of snaps. Yeah, he got cooked on one of those touchdowns, I believe, to Elijah Arroyo, the tight end for. Was it? Yeah, I think it was Arroyo. Yeah, he got cooked by Arroyo, the tight end, the rookie tight end for out of Miami for Seattle. But I do like how they're starting to try different things personnel wise. I fear it is too late, though. It is too late because even with the injuries, even with all the excuses you can make for this defense, still think there needs to be change. Whether that is Joe Witt, whether that is Jason Simmons, whoever that is, there needs to be change. And this is the type of game that gets people fired. It really is. And I will not be surprised in Monday morning, when this episode comes out, if we hear about a change of leadership on the defensive side of the ball for Washington. It was an embarrassing performance. You look at, Josh Harris, how he's not afraid to get involved in football decisions. Now he's not like, Dave Tepper or anything like that, but we have seen him, want to be involved with the decision making. And this is an embarrassing performance. He was there tonight. And on a night where you're celebrating Art Monk and retiring his jersey number here in Washington, a night that you've got a great atmosphere, a great crowd trying to right the ship after a 3-5 start, just an embarrassing performance such as this one is what gets people fired. It really is. So that's what I gotta say defensively. Final thoughts here. Let me try and pull up and see if Dan Quinn has said anything about this. Yes. All right. Got it. Dan Quinn said Jayden Daniels suffered a left elbow injury. Quinn said he'd provide further details as he got them, but he had nothing more tonight. Trying to find if he said anything notable. I don't think he did about the I don't think he said anything notable about why he was in. Oh, Dan Quinn said there wasn't a discussion to pull Jayden Daniels late in the game, but in hindsight, of course, it would make sense. Dan Quinn said he's furious, obviously. Yeah. All right, so he kind of took accountability in a way. He did take accountability, which is good for him, but definitely shows, this is a pretty big mistake for coaching. This is a pretty big mistake, and a change needs to be made as Washington now falls to 3-6 on the season. I still believe in Dan Quinn, by the way. I'm not someone who I think, clean house, nothing like that. I think this is a very unlucky season for Washington, and definitely think no matter how the season turns out, Dan Quinn should be the Washington Commanders head coach in 2026. But underneath him, especially on the defensive side, coaching wise, some changes need to be made. We're a year and a half into the Joe Witt era. Defensively, we have not seen improvement. We have seen a decline in play so far in his 1.5 years of coaching. So that is also something to be said overall. But yeah, that'll wrap up tonight's episode. A very somber episode, an episode that is, not a fun one to make, and one that, it's hopefully we won't have too many more of these. But with Marcus Mariota being the quarterback for the Commanders for the foreseeable future, definitely does not give me a lot of hope moving forward. Coming off of a 12-5 season, the Commanders are now 3-6 through the first 9 weeks of the year, and oh boy, the next 3 games are on national television. There's a chance that I could see the Week 13 match against the Broncos being moved out of prime time. That is currently a Sunday Night Football matchup, but Washington is stuck playing Detroit on America's Game of the Week next week, and then the Dolphins in Spain in 2 weeks. Those 2 games will be on national television. But that'll wrap up tonight's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I've been your host, Mason Kinnahan. See you guys in the next one. Peace.